The Zodiac Killer. On the night of December 20th, 1968, two teenagers parked on a dark road outside Vallejo, California. Neither of them made it home. 6 months later, it happened again. A parking lot. 4th of July. 2 more victims. Before police had even arrived at the second scene, the killer walked calmly to a payphone and confessed. Then weeks after that, 3 newspapers in Northern California each received the exact same envelope. Inside was a letter full of misspellings and a block of strange symbols, circles, triangles, backward letters, arranged like some kind of code. He demanded the papers printed on the front page. If they didn't, he promised a killing spree. All 3 papers ran it. He signed with a simple image, a circle with a cross through it. This is the story of the man who called himself the Zodiac. To this day, no one knows who he really was. Long before the letters, before the ciphers, before the costume, there was just a road. Lake Herman Road cut through the rural edge of Vallejo, a quiet stretch teenagers used when they wanted to be alone. On December 20th, 1968, 17-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 16-year-old David Faraday drove out there together. Sometime after 11 p.m., a second car pulled up behind them. What happened next was over in minutes. Both were shot outside the vehicle at close range. David died almost immediately. Betty Lou ran and was shot down less than 30 feet from the car. No fingerprints, no clear witnesses, no apparent motive at all. Police had almost nothing to work with. The Vallejo Police Department launched an immediate investigation, but the leads were sparse from the start. The darkness of the road meant no passing motorists had observed the attack. The shooter had taken time to collect shell casings, suggesting a level of deliberation and planning. The weapon used was a 9mm Luger, a caliber and model that would become grimly familiar to investigators in the months ahead. Forensic science in 1968 was far less sophisticated than it would later become. DNA analysis didn't exist. Digital databases couldn't cross-reference suspects across jurisdictions. Police departments in neighboring towns weren't as quick to share information about unsolved cases. It was filed as an unsolved double homicide. In most years, in most towns, a case like that might simply go cold. There were no further leads. No one came forward. But 6 months later, he came back. On the 4th of July, 1969, 22-year-old Darlene Farron and her friend Michael McGay were parked at Blue Rock Springs Park, just a couple of miles from Lake Herman Road. A car pulled up nearby, left, then came back. A man got out, walked straight to their window, and opened fire without a word. Darlene was killed. Michael, shot multiple times, survived. One of the only people who would ever come face to face with this man and live to describe him. Michael said he was stocky, with light-colored hair, somewhere between 26 and 30 years old. The violence was sudden and methodical. There was no robbery. There was no apparent personal conflict between the victims and their attacker. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was execution style, planned and executed with cold precision. The fact that the killer chose a location near Lake Herman Road, the site of his first attack, 6 months earlier, suggested he was making a statement. He was establishing a pattern. He was letting anyone who was paying attention know that this was not a coincidence. Before police even reached the scene, a man called the Vallejo Police Department from a payphone. The voice was flat, almost bored. He confessed to both attacks. He mentioned details about Lake Herman Road that had never been made public. Then he hung up and walked away. Investigators traced the call to a payphone near a gas station. He was already gone. The phone call itself was a calculated risk. He was advertising his crimes publicly now, no longer content to simply attack and disappear. By calling police and providing specific details only the killer would know, he was establishing credibility for what would come next. He was building an audience. He was transforming himself from a murderer into a public figure. The payphone made him untraceable in 1969. No cell towers existed. No GPS could track him. Weeks later came the letters. 3 identical envelopes, sent to 3 separate newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. Inside each one, a cover letter full of deliberate misspellings, and 1/3 of a 408 symbol cipher. He wanted all 3 pieces printed. He claimed that once decoded, the cipher would reveal his identity. He was lying about that, but the threat was real enough that all 3 papers ran it. He wasn't just killing anymore, he wanted an audience. The decision to send fragments to 3 separate papers was psychologically significant. It forced newspapers to either cooperate with each other to solve the puzzle, or watch their competitors potentially crack it first. It created incentive for publication. It guaranteed coverage and debate. The misspellings appeared intentional, not random. The paper choices themselves were strategic. The Chronicle and Examiner were major metropolitan papers. The Times-Herald was a smaller regional publication. The Cipher, later nicknamed the Z408, became an overnight sensation. The FBI tried to crack it. So did the CIA. Neither managed it. It was a school teacher named Donald Hardin, working at his kitchen table in Salinas with his wife Betty, who broke it. In under a week, Betty guessed the killer would open with the word I. She guessed kill would appear somewhere inside. Both guesses were right. From there, the rest of the code began to unravel. What the message said was disturbing. He described killing as more thrilling than hunting animals. He wrote that his victims would become his slaves in the afterlife. It wasn't the language of someone acting out of rage. It read like a ritual, like something he'd thought about for a long time. But buried at the end of the solved cipher were 18 leftover characters that didn't decode into anything meaningful at all. Some believe it was filler, added only to make the 3 mailed sections equal in length. Others believe those 18 letters, rearranged the right way, could spell his name. Mathematicians have calculated there are over 700 billion possible arrangements. That's why no one has proven it either way. Solving the code didn't solve the case. It gave investigators a window into a disturbing mind. It gave them nothing else. No address, no name, no print. In some ways, it made him more famous than ever. Proof that the ciphers worked exactly as intended. The letters kept coming. Month after month, each one more theatrical than the last. He mocked detectives by name. He gave himself credit for crimes investigators hadn't yet connected to him. In one letter, he threatened to shoot out the tires of a school bus and pick off the children as they ran. The threat was specific enough that Bay Area school districts actually assigned police escorts to bus routes for weeks. Newspaper sales spiked every time a new envelope arrived. Radio stations read his words on air. Then on September 27, 1969, he did something no one expected. He attacked in broad daylight. And this time, he wore a costume. College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were picnicking at Lake Berryessa when a man appeared in a black executioner's hood, a dark cape, and clip-on lenses over the eye holes. Stitched onto his chest was the circle and cross symbol from his letters. He told them he was an escaped convict. He said he needed their money and their car. Then he pulled out a length of rope and tied them both up. And then he started stabbing. Cecilia died 2 days later in the hospital. Brian survived and gave investigators the clearest physical description yet. The costume was a critical escalation. It transformed the killer from a shadow figure into someone performing for an audience. The executioner's hood suggested research, planning, intentional imagery. The circle and cross symbol stitched onto his chest meant he'd taken time to prepare the costume in advance, suggesting the Lake Berryessa attack was planned weeks or months earlier. Brian Hartnell's survival gave investigators something they'd never had before: direct testimony from someone who'd spent extended time with the killer. Before leaving the scene, the killer walked over to their car and in black marker wrote the dates of his previous attacks directly on the door, along with his symbol, like a signature. Then he drove to a payphone near the Napa County Sheriff's Office and calmly reported what he'd done. Deputies later described his voice as eerily unbothered. By the time a patrol car reached that phone booth, he was gone. The act of writing on the car was deliberate documentation. He was claiming credit for specific murders, establishing a timeline, creating a record. He was also leaving a message for investigators. The calmness in his voice during the confessional call was noted by multiple deputies. 2 weeks later, October 11, 1969, a 29-year-old cab driver named Paul Stine picked up a fare in downtown San Francisco. The passenger directed him to the Presidio Heights neighborhood, then shot him once in the head. He tore a piece of Stine's blood-stained shirt before stepping out of the cab and walking away. The Paul Stine murder occurred in an urban setting, far from the rural locations of previous attacks. It represented another escalation in scope and boldness. Shooting someone in a taxi on a city street meant accepting greater risk of witnesses and discovery. The fact that he did it anyway suggested growing confidence or a deliberate attempt to demonstrate that geography meant nothing to him. This time, there were witnesses. Teenagers in a nearby house saw a man leaving the scene and called police almost immediately. A patrol car was flagged down within minutes. The officers were given a description: a white male, heavyset, in his early 40s, with close-cropped hair. They drove directly through the neighborhood, and they passed a man who matched that description, walking calmly along the sidewalk. They didn't stop him. A dispatch error had gone out describing the suspect as black, and the officers, searching for a different person entirely, let him walk right past their car. The dispatch error was a catastrophic failure in real time. The killer walked past armed police officers while still carrying Stine's bloodied shirt fragment. If the error hadn't occurred, if the officers had matched the visual description to the verbal description, the case might have ended that night. One error in that chain meant the difference between arrest and escape. It remains one of the most agonizing near misses in the history of American law enforcement. Weeks later, a piece of Paul Stine's shirt arrived at the San Francisco Chronicle, along with another letter and a new cipher, 340 characters long, far more complex than the first. The mailing of Stine's shirt was psychological warfare. He was demonstrating that he'd escaped police. He was producing evidence that could have led to his arrest, and instead using it to taunt investigators. The new cipher, 340 characters, significantly more complex than the Z488, suggested he was testing the cryptography community. That cipher, the Z340, would go unsolved for more than half a century. Unlike the Z488, which fell in under a week, the Z340 defeated everyone who tried it. Amateur codebreakers, university cryptographers, advanced government software. It just sat there, open and taunting, for 51 years. Then, in December 2020, 3 codebreakers working from different continents finally cracked it. An American, an Australian, and a Belgian, using custom-built software that tested over 650,000 possible solutions. The message, once decoded, was almost exactly what anyone might have expected. Pure arrogance. He taunted police for failing to catch him. He mocked the idea of the gas chamber. He bragged about being too clever to be found. The FBI confirmed the solution was genuine. But even then, even after 51 years, there was no name, no address, nothing the world didn't already know. In March 1970, a young woman named Kathleen Johns was driving alone at night with her infant daughter when another driver began flashing his headlights behind her. She pulled over. The man offered to help. He said something was wrong with her rear wheel. Once she was in his vehicle, he began driving erratically, refusing to stop, telling her in a calm voice that he planned to kill her and her baby once they reached somewhere more isolated. At a red light, while the car was still rolling, she grabbed her daughter and jumped out. She ran into the dark until she found help. The Kathleen Johns account represented the closest the killer came to a witnessed abduction and attempted murder with a living victim. Her escape hinged on her quick thinking and the fortuitous timing of a red light. Her account provided investigators with another description and another corroborating detail in the killer's pattern. He targeted isolated victims. He used deception to gain access. He remained calm and deliberate throughout. Investigators later connected details of her account to letters the Zodiac sent in the following weeks. He appeared to reference the abduction directly. If that connection is accurate, Kathleen Johns is the only person who ever escaped him mid-attack and survived to describe it. She wasn't included in his official victim count. Across all of his letters, he claimed 37 victims. Police were able to confirm 5 murders, with hard evidence, and 2 survivors. Whether the rest was truth, fantasy, or simply a calculated effort to keep the fear alive, no one has ever been able to say with certainty. The discrepancy between claimed victims and confirmed victims haunted investigators for decades. Either the killer was lying to inflate his image and maintain fear, or he was responsible for at least 30 murders that went unsolved and unconnected to the Zodiac case. Either the killer was lying to inflate his image and maintain fear, or he was responsible for at least 30 murders that went unsolved and unconnected to the Zodiac case. The second possibility was chilling. It meant either massive institutional failure, or that the killer was targeting transient victims, immigrants, or others whose disappearances might not have generated significant investigation. One name surfaced again and again over the decades of investigation: Arthur Leigh Allen, a former elementary school teacher from Vallejo with a disturbing history and a set of unsettling connections to the case. San Francisco detective Dave Toschi spent years building a file on him. Allen wore a Zodiac brand watch with a circle and cross symbol on the face. His handwriting was flagged. People who knew him described things he'd said that aligned with the killer's letters in uncomfortable ways. He was even interviewed by police multiple times. The case against Arthur Leigh Allen was circumstantial but suggestive. Teachers had access to children in isolated settings. Allen's background included violent behavior and inappropriate interactions with minors. The watch was damning in its coincidence, but circumstance was not evidence. No weapon was recovered. No fingerprints matched. No witness placed him definitively at any crime scene, but it never closed. DNA testing conducted on saliva from one of the Zodiac's envelopes reportedly did not conclusively match Allen. He died in 1992. He was never charged. In 2021, a group calling themselves the Casebreakers announced publicly that they'd identified the killer with certainty. The claim made international headlines for about one news cycle before investigators and cryptography experts picked it apart. The evidence didn't hold. The FBI confirmed nothing. As far as official law enforcement is concerned, the Zodiac case is still open, unsolved, uncharged. That second cipher he mailed, the Z340, took 51 years to crack. Two shorter ciphers he sent after that have never been solved at all. One is 13 characters long, 13, and it has defeated every attempt to break it for more than 5 decades. He may have been testing the code breakers. He may have been hiding something specific. No one knows. It's possible no one ever will. The 13-character cipher is almost absurdly brief, too short to contain sufficient data for pattern analysis. It might encode a single word, a name, a location, or nothing at all. The killer may have deliberately exploited the limitations of cryptanalysis itself, creating an encryption that is mathematically unbreakable by definition. His last confirmed letter arrived in 1974, addressed to the San Francisco Chronicle. After that, nothing. No more ciphers, no more taunts, no more confessions. The letters simply stopped. Whether he died, moved, went to prison under another name, or simply lost interest in the performance, no one has been able to determine. For a killer who had spent years demanding attention, the silence was almost stranger than the letters themselves. The silence raised questions that remain unanswered. Did the killer exhaust his need for public acknowledgement? Did he face arrest on unrelated charges, leading to incarceration that prevented further communication? Did he die, either naturally or by violence? Did he move outside the area and resume killing under a different identity, confusing authorities who didn't have the information to connect new murders to old cases? A cartoonist named Robert Graysmith had been working at the San Francisco Chronicle while the letters were arriving. He kept his own private files on the case for years afterward. Eventually, those files became a book, the definitive account of the investigation, later adapted into a 2007 film that introduced the case to an entirely new generation. True crime communities across the internet are still combing through the same handful of letters, still testing arrangements of those 18 leftover characters, still looking for the one detail everyone else missed. Officially, 5 people were murdered. 2 survived. He claimed 37. None of it has ever been reconciled. Whoever he was, he likely lived out the rest of his life somewhere unremarkable, grew old, maybe had a family, maybe sat across from people at a dinner table who had no idea. Somewhere in some box of old photographs from Northern California in the 1970s, he is probably standing in someone's backyard, squinting into the sun, and no one who owns that photograph knows to look twice. If you want more true dark stories from America's past, subscribe to the 1980 American Story, and I'll catch you next episode.